Tonight, here we're having another testimony meeting. For those of you who are on the teleconference, when you're ready, make sure there's no noise where you are. Press star 1. Listen for the acknowledgement message that your hand has been raised. And when we're ready, we'll call on you. One thing to keep in mind, please keep your comments within 4 minutes. This will give everybody a chance to make their contribution tonight. And before we get started, I'd like to read from the church manual the section entitled Testimonials. Glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. St. Paul. Testimony in regard to the healing of the sick is highly important. More than a mere rehearsal of blessings, it scales the pinnacle of praise and illustrates the demonstration of Christ who healeth all thy diseases. This testimony, however, shall not include a description of symptoms or of suffering, though the generic name of the disease may be indicated. And now I'd like to open the meeting to sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful for the Plainfield Church. It has meant so much to me. The music has been wonderful, and the testimonies have been outstanding. Just recently, I just realized that we have not had a newsletter, and I discovered that it hadn't been published for a couple months, and I decided I'd write one up and see if I could handle it. And I am so grateful to announce that I completed a whole page of it in just a couple days, and I hope it will be useful. For all the blessings I have received since coming to the Plainfield Church, I am most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Jim, it's going to be very useful. And thank you so much for the idea of reinstituting the newsletter. It certainly seems to be missed, and it does fill a hole. I'm very grateful tonight that I've been learning not to react. At times I used to go off like a rocket, but I'm learning that I can see an error and not be taken in by it and handled by it, because that makes the error real, and it would make me its victim. This isn't being nice. It's standing firm and getting out of God's way and letting Him work out the solution in His right way. It's recognizing an error, but not being impressed by it. I am very grateful for practitioner help and for the example of my practitioner. I'm learning so much, and I'm learning things that I'm not even aware of until all of a sudden I find myself acting differently. I am so grateful to God. Only He could perform miracles like this. I'm very grateful. And thank you very much for both of you for your readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Sauna from Illinois, go ahead.
I want to thank you for the wonderful readings this evening and for all that you're doing at the Plainfield Church. I have received so much inspiration and help from your Bible studies and the round table. It's just been wonderful for me, and I have really noticed the change for myself. I'm feeling more grateful, more patient, greater kindness and unselfishness. And I'll give you a small example of that. The other morning, I had a call from our school cook. She called me very early in the morning while I was studying the Bible, and she was calling in sick for the day. Now, normally I would be really bothered by the interruption in my prayer time, and also irritated over the fact that, oh boy, what are we going to do without the school cook coming in? But instead, I just felt a great kindness and understanding, and it was very sincere. I just wished her well, and I called our substitute cook only to find out that she had just gotten a new job. And once again, instead of getting irritated, I just felt genuine happiness for her. And then all of a sudden it came to me, I'll be the cook today. Now, in the past, I would have felt all angry over this inconvenience, and I wouldn't want to do all this work myself, but I felt genuinely sincere in wanting to do the work, and I had the happiest morning in the kitchen. This was such a huge shift for me, and I was just so aware of it. It just was so natural, too. So I'm really grateful to God for the change I'm seeing in my character, and I just want to give gratitude for all that you're doing at Plainfield, because it's been a real blessing to me.
Thank you. Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the readings. Last week, I lost my ID tag that opens the doors to the elementary schools where I work. I saw this as a chance for me an opportunity to prove God's care. I did check around some of the logical places, then I reported it, and I was told I would have one day to find it, and then they would have to disable and replace it. In the past, with things like this, I would begin a manic search before I would even turn to God. I'm very grateful for the watches that are at this church that have helped lay a foundation of active prayer and discipline. And automatically this time, one of the thoughts that came to me was God's care for all the details, and that His power was all that was going on. Some memories of previous testimonies came to thought and brought comfort too. During the day, if anything negative tried to come in my thought, like worry, I replaced it with a spiritual fact such as all things work together for them that love God. When I got home, I checked the path outside and the normal spot where I put my bag, and I had still not found it. I quietly paused in the kitchen, and then I heard a message to put my hand into a box of household papers. And as I reached my hand into the pile, I touched the tag. I didn't even have to route around through the paper. Finding it was wonderful, and also saved the having to go through the process of replacing it. But more importantly, it was an opportunity to show forth God's care. I thank God for the angel messages that are always there for everyone, and I'm very grateful for the work of the Plainfield practitioner who has been helping me remove the obstacles and to quiet my thoughts so that I can hear these messages more consistently. And I'm very, very grateful for Plainfield and all its members and all they do. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Lately, I've been experiencing a lot of doubt and confusion. I have faith, but felt it difficult to trust. Though I remained persistent, something continued to remain out of my reach. I had so many questions that could not be answered by reading alone. An amount of confusion and fear had set in that was hindering my ability to move forward. I prayed to God and asked for His help to find what I needed to know so that I could continue to serve Him. After a few days, the message came very clear that I should go to Plainfield and visit the church, and I would find the answer. My fear of strangers started to get in the way of my obedience to God, but the push to go was strong. In the beginning of the week, a snowstorm hit the area, and the roads were closed. All I could think of was that I had to go. I called my practitioner, who helped me to know that God would open the way if it was His will and not mine. He told me it was very important for me to understand and be sure of the purpose for traveling there. I could not explain it, but I knew I had to go. The morning that I started my journey, the roads were opened up, and I traveled to Plainfield with no problems at all. When I got there, I was greeted with so much unself-love that any fear I believed I had of strangers no longer had a hold over me. The next day, I was taken to the church for the Bible study. I walked in with no expectations, having no real experience with church. I could not even imagine what feelings I may have. When I walked into the auditorium, I instantly understood what it was that God was showing me. The Christ presence was so overwhelming, it could not be denied or doubted or confused or have fear. The next day I attended the Sunday service and received the fullness of its blessing. Never in any of my reading or listening to the service on the internet had I apprehended so clearly anything so filled with the Spirit that it could erase all the doubts and fears I was feeling. Having previously suffered in pain while sitting for any extended length of time, I sat through the service so lifted by love that I felt no pain at all. In Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy writes, "The Church is that institution which affords proof of its utility and is found elevating the race, rousing the dormant understanding from material belief to the apprehension of spiritual ideas and the demonstration of divine science, thereby casting out devils or error and healing the sick." That describes exactly what I had experienced in the Plainfield Church, that I was unable to attain through any other means. The love that radiates there can never be replaced by words. I am so deeply grateful to God for answering my prayer and opening the way, and for my practitioner who continues to bring much-needed healing to my suffering, which inspires me to reach higher than I ever knew was possible. I am grateful to all those who work diligently in unity of spirit so that the light of God never ceases to shine upon the world. I am very grateful to those who took me in for the weekend so that I could be healed. Thank you.
Thank you. Day from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. In many roundtable services, we've been reminded not to compare ourselves to anyone. This has been most helpful to me by allowing me to realize how much I used to compare myself to those around me and even to people I didn't know. And it's also allowed me to be aware of the constant temptation to make these comparisons daily. It's such a relief to know that I have a special purpose, and reminding myself of this frequently allows me to do my best work by trusting that God is guiding me to do just what He wants me to do, the way He wants me to do it, all in His time. I know that He knows what is best for me and for everyone, and I will always be grateful for this new understanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to have found God and Christian Science in this church. I know it heals, but it also protects. This morning, going to my office, I had to get from the left-hand lane into the right-hand lane on a very busy road. I looked in my mirrors and it was clear, but I had a very uneasy feeling. I even glanced over my shoulder, but I did not see anything. But the feeling persisted, and in a few seconds, a car out of I don't know where was right next to me. And I was just so grateful to God for this protection. I've learned in this church to declare when I get in my car that God is behind the wheel of my car and all the cars on the road. And I was so grateful to have learned this because it was such a blessing for me and everyone else on the road, and it goes out to everyone. I am just so grateful for all the practitioner help I'm receiving, for the round tables, the Bible studies,
and all the wonderful people all over the world that are part of this big family. And thank you both for your readings.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for Christian Science and pray for blessing. And thanks, Mrs. Eddy, for bring wonderful way of life. The time I'm enjoying Christian Science, I feel like God is my God. And I feel great. Keep God on mind all the time, every day. Thanks, Bruce, for wonderful reading.
Thank you. The Moores from Georgia, go ahead.
Hi, this is Tony. Yeah, I really appreciate the readings from both of you. Wonderful. I'm really grateful that I'm being taught the different laws of God. I know when I first came to this church, to me, principle was, I kind of thought of it as laws, maybe the Ten Commandments. I don't think I had a real good idea of what it was, but yet all of Christian Science is based on principle. And by working with a practitioner in this church, kind of patiently, when the time is right, maybe sharing the operation of a law that is present in my life, I'm beginning to learn more and more that I'm never without help. And what I mean by that is it's a law that I'm not helpless. I can be in a situation where I don't know what to do. There's something that needs to be done. Maybe something's not right. But I should never feel helpless. Instead, I should know, through spiritual sense, God is there to guide. And I'm turning to that law more and more now, all the time, kind of building my, well, not building, you don't build anything up, but your spiritual, when you strive to listen, your spiritual senses become more active or better used, so you're more familiar. I'm not sure if I'm describing it right. It's hard to describe, but it's a law that we're never helpless. And I'm very grateful for this fact. Practitioner that I'm working with has been helping me. I've had some challenges at work, and he has reassured me that I am not helpless, and that if I listen, I will be guided what to do. And I have made a series of decisions that has taken me to a new vantage point, which I'm very grateful for. It could be profound, but certainly it shows me again that I'm never helpless, and that's a law for all of us to lean on. It's a law of God. God has given man dominion, and that's a wonderful law to lean on. That's not a broken reed that will not pierce our heart as we read in the Bible. Quite the opposite. And very grateful to be here tonight. And again, Elsie and Bruce, thank you for those readings.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Thank you. I wish to express my gratitude for help received from a Plainfield practitioner for going on a recent trip to visit some family members on my husband's side. The practitioner told me to bring a light, to keep my own counsel, and watch out for personal sense. All the logistical details of the trip went well, and most of the family things went well too. But there, at one point during the trip, some other things came up with a particular family member, and in the past, I would have just automatically assumed, well, this was a terrible trip or something. But I've learned through some experiences that and I've been taught to look for the blessing and to get the blessing. And as a result of this, I was able to understand this family member much better, and also to be able to forgive them. At least I thought they needed to be forgiven. As it turns out, by understanding them, I found out that that wasn't really, anyway, there was feelings of love and caring replaced some of the personal sense that had come up for me. And I'm just very grateful for being able to learn these things in this church. Thank you.
Thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. I want to thank you for the church service, for the readings, for everything about Plainfield. Last week, I didn't come to the service thinking about the cold symptoms I had. It wasn't terrible. But during the service, I had a healing. It shows the power of the church, real church. I listened to two people talk about I have got cold, and I looked it up, 239 in miscellaneous writing. And by the end of the service, I didn't have cold. It tried to come back while I was preparing for bed, but I stood my ground mentally and thought about all the wonderful things I've been learning with the practitioner and the readings and round table, everything. And it left. So I looked up, I've got cold, and really I read the whole thing. This is one of my favorite parts. If a cold could get into the body without the assent of mind, nature would take it out gently or let it remain as harmlessly as it takes the frost out of the ground or puts it into ice cream to the satisfaction of all. It's a beautiful reading, and I thank you again for everything in Plainfield Church. Good evening.
Thank you.
Over the last few weeks, I've heard multiple times about the supposed need to get a flu shot, and each time I pretty much thought, that's dumb. But then I woke up feeling those symptoms and realized that each of those aggressive suggestions came to me and I didn't do anything to handle it. It made me truly appreciate the opportunity we have here to learn how to handle these claims of animal magnetism, and gave me the push I needed to actually start doing the work. From that much needed lesson, I began to see, in a small scale anyway, about how much the practitioners at this church go through to do the work God calls them to do. I am so grateful for everyone who makes this church what it is, and I'm delighted God has found a way for me to be a part of this wonderful mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne from Vermont, go ahead.
I wanted to express my thanks this evening for the inspiring readings and testimonies. There's such a fellowship, I feel, with the other members of this church. And it's such a blessing to be able to attend these services over the internet. Had an experience today that I just wanted to share. We have a pretty heavy snowstorm today, and I found myself out perhaps getting home a little later than I should have, and I have a very small car, and we live on a hill, and I kind of I grew up in California, so I'm still not used to driving in snow. So it was a bit disconcerting to see that my car wasn't really moving very effectively, and I was definitely having trouble getting up the hill, and the passage from Psalm 46 came immediately to my thought, that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Because I felt like I was in trouble, and for people who have grown up in the snow, maybe not quite as scary, but as I was stuck in the snow and calling my husband, my hands were shaking as I held the phone, but I just knew that God would not leave me helpless or comfortless. So my husband said that he would come and get me with his car. I could drive home, and he would get my car up the hill. But I waited for him, and he actually came down on foot. It's about a mile up that hill. So he got in and tried to get the car going, and did a pretty good job at it. It was just inching its way up, and I could smell the burning rubber, and then he said, "What is this button here?" And I quickly got out the owner's manual and discovered that I have a button that allows the traction. So within seconds, the car was zooming up the hill. This really was a blessing, not only to get home safely, but to learn how to drive my car in the snow. So I felt very grateful that God was a very present help in trouble. And other cars, I should say that other cars, much heavier cars, were also having trouble moving on the hill. But everyone was in such good spirits, and everyone got home safely, and people were smiling. So I just wanted to thank this church for teaching me how to make what we learn in the Bible practical. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the readings and the life lessons I've learned on gratitude here. The readings were really inspiring and awakening. Without gratitude, life is dull. And it was before I got here. I thank God for Mrs. Eddie's instituting a Thanksgiving service. But the idea of gratitude truly has changed my life. Also, recently I have a little extra time on my hands, and I'm grateful for being invited to lunches with a practitioner and some local church workers. I found it giving me so much more, I think, courage and confidence in the things that I felt directed to do. Just recently also, I had a terrible itch, and it wasn't right. And I knew that God was right there. Some time ago I had an itch like that. And I was spiritual. But I think the traveling and visiting and talking with my friends at lunch, church members, lifted my thoughts so that itch just miraculously went away. It was, I think, that they helped me to lift my thought and to feel like I should be at peace, and was. So I thank God very much for all the support here. No matter what, it's always on an upward road, and this is just a wonderful place to be.
Thank you.
In the lesson this week in Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says, humanity advances slowly out of sinning sense into spiritual understanding. Unwillingness to learn all things rightly binds Christendom with chains. I've been thinking about that today and thinking about in my own experience how I had been, in a way, unwilling to learn things rightly. And I was thinking of examples that I had. One, if I wanted a healing, I really just wanted the healing, and I wanted it quickly. I wasn't really thinking about maybe what lessons did I need to learn, or as we've talked about in our round tables, how there's a transformation of a life to happen. I didn't think in those terms. I was just trying to get well fast. I wanted that quick fix. And that really did bind me with chains until I learned that if I wanted a healing, I needed to turn to God, ask Him what it was I needed to learn, what more did I need to know, and to feel His presence and power. And in that way, I would have a true healing. And the second one was dishonesty. And I'd always thought myself as an honest person, but many times I didn't want to admit that I had a problem, or I would cover up things. Mrs. Eddy talks about in Science and Health substituting fair seeming for straightforward character. So yeah, I was putting on a show, a front, to cover up what I was perhaps really thinking or feeling, or maybe what was going on in my home, so everybody else would think things were just perfect. And that was truly dishonest, and it kept me bound in chains, because in order to have a healing in science, you have to admit that there's something you need to be healed of. You have to have that humility to start out there. And as Mrs. Eddy says, error uncovered is 2/3 destroyed, and the final third destroys itself. And then I guess one other thing I was thinking about that kept me in chains, and it was an unwillingness to learn all things rightly, and that was Craig talked about it too, and it was ingratitude. There again, I thought I was a grateful person, but not truly grateful, not as you read tonight, grateful for life, truth, and love, not truly grateful for God, not really. It was a very superficial sense of the whole thing. Nor was I grateful for all the sacrifices that have gone before me, Mrs. Eddy, Christ Jesus, prophets, people who have fought for our country, all these things. I wasn't grateful. I didn't think about that. And I had to learn to be grateful. As you read in the Bible, the leper that came back to give thanks, he was made whole. And in all these ways, when I realized the true sense of this science, of Christian Science, and was willing to learn things rightly, I did become whole, and healing took place. I'm so grateful for Christian Science. I'm so grateful for this very holy service we have on the eve before Thanksgiving. So grateful for the testimonies I heard tonight and those wonderful readings. And I look forward to seeing you all again in the morning.
Thank you.